Okay. So in 2023, we collected these species. And as you can tell, it's a lot of grasses, because region 2 is here eastward. So, Colorado is where all the action is in region 2 because we've got the Rocky Mountains. But we've also got part of the Great Plains. And so places like Pawnee National Grassland, Cimarron and Comanche National Grasslands in Colorado are also Forest Service property. And so we collected a lot in grasslands. Also like up in Thunder Basin in Wyoming. And you'll see on that calendar. So that sheet, this one, let's see. Hold on one sec. When we look at this, this is developed based on what we did just by trial and error last year. So like CONIPS came out on the Pawnee collection. That was actually the first collection we participated in because these ones are all not in Colorado. But if you have a particular knowledge or experience of these locations, and like Andrea said, like, oh, that there's a really active like herbarium at the University of Wyoming, that would be the kind of fun tips that you could help share with us. But come mid-July, Pawnee, and Cimarron and Comanche. So you'll see we'll hit those grasslands first, and then we'll be in the Southwest and the Northwest of Colorado. And then we kind of circle back towards the Front Range and Central Mountains areas. Then back out to the GMUG, back in, Central Mountains, and then leaving the state and then coming down south to Pike. And so when we think about that, looking at these places, right? Now look at the species list and think about how it makes sense, right? We do have mountainous areas, but a lot of our landscape is grasslands. So you'll see lots of grasses on this list and just a few forbs. And this year there'll be a pivot towards species for post-fire restoration. So we'll see the species list shift slightly. But what I want to accomplish with you is show you how to become an expert scouter by being able to be sure about your identification using a naturalist and dichotomous key as a tool. So let me go forward here. So we will go, so we're going to do the first species we're going to do is the Colorado state grass. And so this whole, if you were there last night, or you might recall from COVID times, we had these like iNaturalist working group meetings where we would just kind of like look at the key and look at Ackerfield and look at iNaturalist and decide what would you have had to take a picture of to be sure about your identification. And that way you have to look at the key because you have to know what you would have had to have seen to be sure. But we all have a gut reaction with Bouteloua, and last night I focused on like tree species that everyone is familiar with. So my general instructional premise here is that you will become better at identifying plants and using a dichotomous key if you look at plants you already know. And so you're not using the key at first to discover the identity of a plant. You're using it to learn about botanical vocabulary and figure out what makes your plant, right? And so we're going to go through this brief activity. So Bouteloua, we'll start there. And I'm going to go between this annotation of the Ackerfield key and a photo that I think represents evidence for what we're seeing there. Okay, so are we all on board? Thumbs up. This is one of our species on the list that won't go away no matter what, because the Colorado state grass has really broad abundance. So when we look at Bouteloua, is everyone familiar with blue grandma, eyelash grass? And we'll take a look at those pictures in a second. So let's look here. So we're at Bouteloua and we're trying to figure out what species it is. So we, in a dichotomous key, there are couplets. So you have to decide either or, yes or no. Always two choices. Dichotomy means making a choice. So the first choice would be Bouteloua curtipendula, which is side oats grandma. And if you read this instruction, it says the small 1 to 3 centimeters long pendulous spikes, right? So if you close your eyes and think of side oats grandma, right, there's like a single spike just dangling. Alternatively, we have an inflorescence of dense sessile spikelets in 2 rows along one side of a flattened rachis, resembling an eyelash. So let's take a look. Okay, so one key factor of Bouteloua is that there's always 2 of these spikes on a stem. So that's a great indicator. And it looks like an eyelash, right? And our other grandmas don't look quite like this, but one species that does look like this is buffalo grass, Bouteloua dactyloides, which I think just got moved to Bouteloua dactyloides now, which makes sense because it's very similar. So buffalo grass is co-dominant with this grass, blue grandma, in the Colorado landscape, but buffalo grass is really low-growing plant, and the spikelets are much shorter. But they do have this same similar appearance. Looks much more like this than it does side oats grandma. So there we have our sessile spikelets in 2 rows along one side of a flattened rachis. And as we do this, we have to think about what these words mean. And so can anyone, not to challenge you too much, but the rachis, thinking about that, what is that? Do you guys know? And you can offer a suggestion in the chat. So a great way to do this is Google it, or use the glossary in your key, but I like to have 2 things going on, right? So I can keep working the key and then have the glossary on in another book, or sometimes you can print one off the internet. I've cut the one out of my Acrofield and then it's just like an insert. So basically, see here in this lower spike, yeah, this stem, thank you, Pamela. We've got this stem, and see how it's like flattened and it's all on one side. And so that's what we're looking at. And all of these things here are individual inflorescences in the spike. All right, so let's go back here. So we choose 1B. And I didn't put a picture of curtipendula in here, but you might look that up if you don't know what it looks like. All right, so 1B tells us to go to 2. And so on 2A, we have a stem nodes or internodes are densely woolly hairy, or they're glabrous. And what does glabrous mean, folks? Does anyone know? Or you can look it up and add it to the chat. And there's our stem.
Since I can't find the chat, I think glabrous is, yeah, thanks, Andrea got me. Smooth, wacky hands.
Yeah, so thinking about dichotomous options, right? So one is like the stem is hairy, one is the stem is smooth. And so looking at this picture, is the stem hairy or smooth? And you can respond in the chat if you want to be interactive or just say it out loud. Okay, so I think these hairs are arising from the ligule, but the internode are these long pieces before and after that. So in that right here, this stem, this is smooth. Can we agree on that? Okay. So when we look at the key, we're going to choose 2B. Stem internodes are glabrous. And then we go to 3. All right. So this one I challenged me for a while, like just trying to find a picture that actually showed this, but you could just take this picture so easily if I had thought about it when I took these pictures originally. So the rachis is extended beyond the terminal floret in the inflorescence 5 to 10 millimeters. Okay, or it's not extended beyond the terminal floret. So let's take a look at that. I think these are the best pictures that I could find. So if this is the rachis here, right, and it was extended beyond the last floret, I would expect it to be sticking out here, somewhere out here at the top middle of the page. Can you guys see my cursor? Okay. So I think this picture is showing us that it's not extended past the terminal floret. And then here in a season, in a picture with the grass in a dormant state, same thing, right? We can see it kind of looks like this might be this one dark line after the last kind of bump here might be an extension of it, but it's not past the last floret. Can we agree with that? Thumbs up. At this point, pretty confident after looking at lots of pictures on iNaturalist that it's not extended beyond the terminal floret. But then we have two characters to look at. We can also look at the leaf blades, okay, with long papillose hairs along the margins at the base, okay? So here's the leaves. When I look at this, right, leaf blades usually lacking long papillose base hairs along the margins at the base. Okay, so if we can, so you can see there's like hairs at the ligules, but she didn't even ask about that. And actually a lot of grasses have hairs at the ligules, and how that looks is a really great defining character, but Ackerfield did not employ it at all. But I always 100% of the time take a picture of this place right here, this ligule place, because it can be folded or it can be rounded, it can have a changing color, it can be papery, hairy, all sorts of different things. But right now we're looking at the actual leaves, right? And are we seeing any long papillose hairs off of the leaf margins? Yay or nay? Yeah, Bridget, I think I agree with you. I'm not seeing that. And what I do, you can see that like on little blue stem. But what it looks like to me is like a five, like the new beard of a 13-year-old. They're like really sparse hairs. But I didn't see that, right? So we've got two characters here. The leaves aren't really hairy, and neither is the rachis extended beyond the terminal floret. So we go to 4, blooms with papillose-based hairs along the nerves, perennials, or lacking papillose-based hairs along the nerves, annuals. So let's take a look. So we already looked at this picture, and you can see up real close that actually the glooms are pretty hairy. It's kind of hard to see what's going on here, like where they are. Are they on the nerve veins or not? But it doesn't matter because we're only being asked if they're hairy or not. And they are. And so there we have Blue Grandma. The end.